Hi, welcome to Detours Understanding Acquired Brain Injury. And I'd like to introduce you to our newest host and our Chief Operations Officer at Friends with Brain Injury. Uh, this is Jennifer, and I'd like to welcome you. Jennifer, hi.
Hi,
Hi.
thank
And
you.
it's a pleasure to have you with us. And like as we do with our other hosts, just if you could please tell us about your story. If you could tell us about before your brain injury, your background, stuff like that, and about your brain injury, what happened, all that.
Well, my background is primarily in academia. Um, my doctorate's in philosophy. After I got my doctorate, I taught briefly at Duke and Columbia, and then I went into the Peace Corps. I served 2 years in Cameroon, and when I got back, I had met a boy, and he's from San Francisco. So I came to San Francisco with him, and that was in 2005. I started working at the San Francisco SPCA that same year. I became the director of animal assisted therapy department at the San Francisco SPCA, which is taking dogs into nursing homes, hospitals, and other places. And we don't just work with dogs, we worked with cats and a bird and a pig and other animals. I did that for 15 years. And then I was set to resign because I just sort of run my course there and I wanted to do something new. I was set to resign at the end of 2019 on December 31st, but I had my traumatic brain injury on October 9 of 2019. And I was at work. Work was extremely stressful. I was also on a lot of medication for my psychiatric issues, probably too much medication. And I had a grand mal seizure and I dropped like a sack of potatoes onto a polished concrete floor where I smacked the back of my head. And then the EMTs came and they took me to the hospital. I was still having seizures. They got me into the ER. I was still having seizures. They were pumping me full of Ativan and other things, and I was still having seizures. So they strapped me down and intubated me. And this is where my daughter came into the ER. She was age 4, with her grandparents who have made better choices of judgment, but are lovely people. And it just so happened. And then I was taken to the ICU after I finally stopped seizing. They gave me Keppra. I was conscious apparently, and I was talking to people and interacting with people for a few days, but I have no memory of that. Uh, the next memory I have is several days later, they were putting socks on my feet because I was cold. And that's the first memory I have after the seizure. And I don't remember the seizure either. I was just talking to my assistant and it all goes black. And then it's not even that it goes black, it's just it's not there. And
That's similar to my experience. Like I have no recollection, and I want to stress to anyone who's watching, please forgive me for interrupting for a moment. This is what, when I talk about altered level of consciousness without being unconscious, about being a severe traumatic brain injury. This is what, when I make reference to a person where you could still be conscious and have a severe TBI as manifested by altered level of consciousness. So, what Jennifer's describing here would be a severe traumatic brain injury because altered level of consciousness and the new standards is qualifies as severe TBI with apologies.
oh, no worries. Um, I was released from the hospital not too long afterwards. Um, I was given referrals for a neurologist and neuropsych rehab. And I went back to work. which is kind of amazing to me at this point, but I went back to work and I went to the appointments and I was like, how long is it going to be before I'm normal again? Because I didn't feel 100%. But I finished a book at work. I was on like some sort of adrenaline rush or something. I don't even know. But I went back to work. I finished a book. I turned over my position. I resigned. I went to all the appointments and was just like, how long is it going to be? And they told me a minimum of 6 months. And I accepted that. And then I started, I thought I was on the road to recovery. And then in mid-January, it just hit me again. And I ended up on the sofa for 2.5 years, unable to brush my own teeth. It just had this sort of delayed response in me. But that was the really rough part of my recovery for my family because they knew I was suffering, but they didn't know what to do. And they would try all of the ways to get me to engage, and I just couldn't. And I had a young daughter at the time who just desperately wanted me to play with her. And I still have this mother's guilt of not being able to. I I spent a lot of time feeling guilty. That was the major feeling I had during those 2.5 years. I just felt awful about all the things I wasn't doing. And I was cataloging them like, and every day I would make a list of all the things I was going to do the next day. And then the next day would come and I just couldn't.
You couldn't do it,
And
right?
I just feel terrible. And this just compounded on itself. It really, my self-esteem took a blow, I would
This is
say.
adynamia. Those of you who are watching who are familiar, I'd like you to check out our video about adynamia, this trouble with drive. It's, again, engine runs, can't shift into drive. It's typical of a medial frontal lobe injury where Kate and I talk about that. There's a specific video also where we reference we have the intention, we even have things planned out, but when it comes to time to shift into drive, we can't do that, and that's because that those systems that assist, are related to motivation and drive, get up and go, are damaged, and this is classic frontal lobe damage. And those of you who are watching, or family members, need to be aware that that delay that Jennifer's describing, again, that delay is typical. Usually it takes time for the injured brain cells to make up their mind, live or die, live or die. And so that then you see encephalomalacia, which is the death of the white matter that, it hasn't made up its mind, but those that do, eventually they die off. And so that's the change. That's why they may seem to do better for a while and then go down. That is another component. And a lot of your ED physicians or others don't know that because they're not taught it, that you need to find specialists for. Anyway, with apologies, please.
So that consumed my life for a long time. And I did take classes. I took master's classes at Berkeley for creative writing. Um, because there were certain things I could do, but then when it came time to like take care of any sort of self-care, I just I couldn't even begin to fathom how to do it. And it seemed so pointless. And I don't know. But after a couple of years, I had sort of a leap and I was able to leave the house again. And I was able to take classes at Berkeley. And I ended up um, completing my coursework. And I felt a lot better, but I wasn't 100%. My self-care still sucked. I still saw it as pointless, but I was able to do it for myself, which is a huge leap. And that lasted for another probably year. And then I had another jump where I think it was because I started a new medication called modafinil, which cleared my brain fog, which I already had ADHD, so the brain fog wasn't new to me, but my Adderall wasn't helping. And I know running helps me a lot with clearing brain fog, but I wasn't able to run because I gained a whole bunch of weight from being sedentary. And so I had this leap, and the brain fog cleared, and I was able to have goals again. Like, have goals that I actually thought I might achieve.
This is
And
again with the adynamia. And those of you who are watching, keep in mind the adynamia is a disorder of consciousness. It is along the continuum from at its mildest end, which is apathy and adynamia, all the way up to coma. Modafinil is used to help awaken people from comas. This is why ADHD and ADD medication may not work, but modafinil may. It helps the process of awakening people. And this is why those of you who are watching, if they give your loved one or you may recommend, hey, maybe modafinil may assist. Dextromethorphan intravenously. There are some other medications that help with disorders of consciousness because adynamia and apathy are the mildest side of a disorder of consciousness. As I said, the highest end is coma. So it is a disorder of consciousness. It's not being lazy. It's not that they don't want to. It's not that those of us who have it, you know, but this is why that medication works. It is a disorder of consciousness that originates deep inside the brain, and control mechanism is up here. It's complicated neuropathology, but it's important to stress this, that you understand some of the neuropath, why this is. It's like, oh, it must be mental. No, this is a serious neurological disorder that needs addressing. It's why modafinil can help in some cases where some of the milder agents don't work.
yeah, and I think it definitely helped me. And I got in an exercise regimen,
Mm,
and I'd been vegan for a while, but I started taking care of myself better, like getting enough protein and stuff like that, which is really difficult when you're a vegan. And I eventually started running again,
good.
and I lost a lot of the weight, and I felt a lot better about myself. I think my self-esteem still took a hit
You know,
because there for a long time I was unable to do anything, and I just felt so crappy about myself. But I think it came back a lot when I was able to run again. Just that very act clears my head, and it also makes me feel so much better to start the day. And it helped. Um, since that second leap, I've come on board with the Friends with Brain Injury, and I have um, reclaimed my volunteer status. I love volunteering. It's one of my favorite things to do. And I would like to be seen first and foremost as a volunteer and as a compassionate person. So it's really important to me, and I couldn't volunteer much when I was incapacitated. Um, what else? I play with my daughter now, and that's huge. I'm still not the best at self-care, but
mm.
I'm pretty good.
A lot of what you're describing is something a lot of us with brain injury. I mean, as I remind people, because I've been told, oh, you seem fine to me, it's like 30 years survivor. It has been 30 years of an uphill battle against brain injury. And when I get tired at night, people who know me who have had the displeasure of watching me try to communicate after a certain hour, it's like, oh yeah, it looks like you got brain injury. It's like, yeah, it's just like I'm good at hiding it. It takes time to learn how to, and then I've learned, and plus neuroplasticity. But what you describe, and as far as like mental illness, a lot of like people have either before or develop it after. I mean, I didn't have problems with depression or anxiety before, but I better believe afterward, because not only the trauma, but also, it changes the way your brain works. And then you also had seizures and everything else. So did I. And so, like, what you describe is like the story of a lot of us. And, what you describe reminds me of Kate and reminds me of things that Kimmy has described, and what like many of us have described. And what's important is sharing the you're not alone kind of thing. I think so important, and it's like you sharing here is like helps people get that they're not alone. What kind of stuff, would you want to talk about in the future? What would be your
In the future, you mean videos with you?
videos and or writing or whatever, to come with yeah.
Well, I think that talking about my recovery is important. I'm still in the process. I don't feel 100% of myself. I still have trouble with reading, but I do feel a lot better. I think I had psychiatric issues long before the brain injury, serious ones, and those haven't been exacerbated by the brain injury,
That's good because that's uncommon. Most people have their issues made much worse by
but
brain.
they haven't gotten better.
Well, that's uncommon that things get better with that. Although some people do have less anxiety. There are those people who report that their anxiety is down after brain injury. Kate talks about that in the video.
Hmm.
That she felt better after less anxiety. She used to be very anxious. So that helped. But I wouldn't recommend you go around bashing your heads, folks. Don't watch our video. So yeah, please don't go hit your head. Like one guy, they interviewed him and they said his wife got better after her head injury. Please don't do anything dumb out there. Okay. Yeah, like don't go hitting your head or other people's heads, please.
There
Yeah,
is
tongue in
no
cheek.
part of me or no trait of mine that improved with brain injury.
Uh-uh. Me either. But we talk about that in video, and Kate says she feels better and she's calmer. And it's like, okay, great. We're not looking for lobotomies here. It's like, yeah, no. Although, maybe being more extroverted was a positive thing for me. I used to be, it's like, I don't know. Um, so maybe talking about mental health would be a thing too.
Yeah, I could talk about mental health.
And exercising and stuff like that. I mean, that is big for us because, whether it's running, whether it's swimming, which is a huge thing that they recommend, aquatic activities, because that helps in so many ways. Um, but yeah, I mean, if you're able, a lot of folks just don't have the stamina, drive, or the physical condition that they can run like you do. Um, so that's a good thing, you know. Academic work, doing educational stuff is definitely, if you have the cognitive resources, something I discussed about. A lot of people are high functioning in our group, very high functioning because they're bright, and high IQ TBI is a thing too. A lot of bright people, and I think because of cognitive reserve, are more likely to survive. That's at least what my observations have shown. I don't know if that's what research would show, but I think that gives you some backup, basically, more efficiently wired and stretching neuroplasticity more. And so I think that's a factor too. I would love to do some research on that, but I would need to, that would be a very complex study. But I'd be fascinated to see the results of that. Um,
Yeah, I could talk about what are my strengths. I could talk about volunteering.
that,
I could talk about
yes,
running. I could talk about managing a nonprofit. I could talk about teaching college students. I I could talk about the Peace Corps.
that would be interesting. And about and about the benefits for volunteering. Definitely, because a lot of our folks can't work anymore. And so
I'm currently on
searching
disability,
for
but I do
meaning,
aspire to work again.
searching for meaning, that existential search. And so volunteering is one of the ways, um, that, that to help a lot of people. Brain injury is part of the reason behind this organization. Um,
Yeah, I do a couple of different things. I take
mhm,
my cat, I have a therapy cat, and I take my feline to the VA
yeah, that's
and
cool.
to Buena Vista Manor, which is a retirement center, and to an inpatient psychiatric unit for adults. And we just go there and hang out with people and give them access to the human companion animal bond for a while, which is shown to relieve stress and improve heart
Yeah,
rate, improve respiration, improve immunity, all sorts of things.
hmm, that's
And
cool.
I
Pet
also
therapy is awesome.
volunteer with the Richmond District Neighborhood Center. And I bring them blankets. And I also used to do food deliveries. They have a pantry, and I still volunteer at the pantry sometimes for people who come into the pantry. And I've offered to help them with grant writing, and we're in the process of doing that. And then I have my work with Friends with Brain Injury, which
Yeah, we're
started out as a
grateful for your help.
volunteer situation.
Yep, no, we're grateful for that help too. Because, well, I mean, we're working on reaching out like everywhere because acquired brain injury can happen to anyone, anywhere. And we're not alone. 1 in 20 people, acquired brain injury survivors. 1 in 20. It's a
Yeah.
staggering. That is a staggering number. Not just trauma, but strokes, encephalitis, meningitis, all kinds of forms of cardiac arrest, brain injury, all kinds. And it's just staggering. And then the lack of understanding. May, by the way, is Brain Cancer Awareness Month. Um, and kids and adults, and not sufficient money into research into brain cancer. And, it's like, it's just so we're going to be looking at talking about that in May, um, talking about like some of the new treatments and things, and some of the more serious. There are certain varieties of brain cancer that we have no treatments for, that it is invariably fatal, especially in kids, the IPG and a few others. So, our company's mission is a big one, but it's worth it, you know. So is there anything you want to share? Any advice or anything you'd want to give to, to new survivors, brand new survivors who they're just or their families?
I think the one thing that would have helped me is being okay with where I was at the moment. That I feel like, especially when I was down, every day was a comparison of what I used to be and what I was now. And that comparison just leads you down this spiral of despair. And I think if I could have given myself the latitude and the permission to start fresh and just look at today as today and not compare it with a day in 2018 or a day, even in November of 2019, where I was really productive randomly. I think that that would have been really helpful because it is like starting with a clean slate to some extent, and you have to relearn so much, and you have to be patient with yourself and be patient with your loved ones and recognize that the person you see before you is not in considerable ways, measurable ways, the same person who was before you before the brain injury. And that they have to relearn things, that maybe they are going to become closer to that person again. And I do feel like I'm a lot closer to being the person I was before the brain injury, but it has forever changed me. And it's been 4.5 years since my brain injury. And if you looked at me the first couple of years, I looked absolutely hopeless. And I felt absolutely hopeless. And I think I felt increasingly hopeless, or that hopelessness was increased by that comparison. So if you can get your head around this being a new normal and this being a new, sorry, and this being a new way of being for you, I think you could have hope on a day-to-day basis. Whereas I was constantly looking back and constantly looking forward and seeing all of the things I wasn't instead of seeing anything that I was. And like I say that I had these leaps in recovery. And I don't know if I hit some sort of critical mass and then I leapt into the next stage, or if it had been building and I just didn't see the build. But I think it's possible that it had been gradually building and I was so oblivious to it because all I could think of was that it wasn't the way I was before. And so moving past that somehow, and I think a therapist is a good idea, or at least some neutral party that you can talk to that can give you some perspective, that can get you out of your own head is useful. And I had that, but that comparison just did me in on a daily basis. And if you could find a way to move beyond that, which I don't have any strong advice for how to do that, but if you can find a way to move beyond that comparison and meet each day as a fresh slate with opportunity instead of this crushing defeat of what you're not, I think that would be huge. And it would probably help in recovery because you would have a brighter attitude. My attitude sucked.
High achievers, especially IQ, TBI, high achievers really struggle. And this is what I've heard the story from just about everyone who's been with us. Same thing. And it's like the high functioners, it's like it's devastating and accepting who you are after is really takes the longest. And healing on the psychological plane is hardest because I'm not who I once was. And I guess you know, so very wise advice. And I don't think there is any one piece of advice because each one of our brain injuries is as different as our brain. For me, I still sometimes will struggle on and off, especially when I'm trying to do something that I know came easily to me and I can't but I spent more time post brain injury than pre. So, I'm at that point where, I'm like, really the old self was less me than the new one is. So I can't call it the new me. It really is me. And, when you can finally just say, that's me, you know, as opposed to, but that takes a long time to come to that too. So I want to thank you, for a lot of really good insights, and hopefully see you, some with some more really good like discussions like this, because this kind of stuff is like the difficult nitty gritty kind of stuff, and like families deal with this as much as the survivor does, but they
Mhm.
necessarily, especially like kids, for example, it's like they have nowhere to go and they often are forgotten. Kids of survivors, or if the kid is a survivor, it's like there's really nothing. And so I often think about that too. And it's like double, triple challenging. And there are some clips that I've put together that I want to upload soon to talk where kids talk about the challenges of being a kid with either a parent with brain injury or of their own. Yeah. So, all right. So I want to say thanks and say so long. And you okay? um, so saying bye. And
Okay. Bye,
so
Mark. Thank you.
please click like and subscribe. Don't forget the bell icon. And if you have any messages for Jennifer, please, please post below. And please share this with anyone else. And don't forget our website for friends with brain injury. And there's a lot of good stuff on there. And also, we have a Facebook site. And every Monday at 8 o'clock, we have our uh, group, our support group. So take care. See you guys later. Bye.